Someone want to pray us in? Anybody?
James, it's a good job for you, honey. It really is.
I'll read in a minute, but I'm not good at prayer.
Okay. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we do thank you so much for this day, this nice crisp fall day, and we thank you so much for all the wonderful blessings you've given us, especially your grace. Help us to learn from your word, to be changed by it and made new. All this we ask in Jesus' holy and precious name. Amen.
Amen.
Hey, come on in. Here, have some Ruth questions.
Here's this chair if you want this one.
Come on,
All
man.
right.
Sorry we ain't been here the last couple of weeks. We didn't have family.
Well, it's all right. I've just been judging you harshly every time.
I sit over there.
I want a tick mark at the door. Mom.
not here. That's all right. I said if you go on YouTube, you can find them now because I finally figured it out.
Did you really?
I did. I finally got it all figured out. And of course I'll say that and something will go wrong and then it won't record this time. But anyway, it's all right. All right, so getting us started with the book of Ruth. First question, just getting us to think about things. Think of a time when you were surprised by the lengths to which someone would go out of to the lengths to which someone would go out of love. What made his or her love extraordinary?
See, I wasn't sure about that question. Like, to the lengths which someone would show love, or with the lengths to which someone would
Would
Fall
go
out of
because
fall out
of
of love.
love. Yeah.
Because of love?
And of course, I know that the answer that everybody could give, of course, is Jesus. But we'll save that one for further on down. But secular.
It makes me think about what parents do for their children.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
some things, some sacrifices that your parents have to make for their children,
Mhm.
especially if they're hurt or sick or, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about when my dad and stepmom basically moved my grandparents into their house for a couple of years after my granddad started to get dementia and Granny was in poor health as well. They just lived there for how many years? What, 2, 3 years?
So, wow.
And then Pops went into a care facility and then passed away. But then Granny stayed with them for, gosh, well, heck, now that I think, because Granny passed away a good 5 years after Pops, and she lived with them for most of that time.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, that's an awful lot.
My grandfather had Parkinson's, and I remember him driving me when I was 5. So that was the last time I remember him driving a car. So he started getting Parkinson's, and he died when I was like 15. But he was not in a hospital or a nursing home that entire time until maybe like the last month of his life. So my grandmother, took care of him at home and wanted him to be at home that whole time. Even though he got out of the house and walked down the highway looking for home.
Mm-hmm.
He did that one time, and she had to lock him in the house, and I had to get Papa sick, but only about a month, maybe less than a month before he passed away, was he in a hospital.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because people will do an awful lot for love of people. And that's one of the things that we're really going to see here with this story of Ruth. So we're going to read the entire first chapter of Ruth. So before we read it, we think about what questions we're going to have here. What has happened to Naomi that she decides to call herself by a new name? Whom does she blame for her circumstances? And how does that make you feel? So this is kind of a meaty bit here. So let's all just follow along. And I'll just go ahead and give us a read. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. He and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, and they were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died, so that the woman was left without her 2 sons and her husband. when she arose with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard that in the fields of Moab, that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her two daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her two daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each of you in the house of her husband." Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb, that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go to your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they were grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me." Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So the two of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" She said to them, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi, when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. All right, now just as a aside there, she said, "Do not call me Naomi," and the basic meaning of that, Naomi, kind of means pleasant. So that's what the word Naomi meant. But she says, "Don't call me Naomi." Hold on, so that we can make this make sense here in just a minute when we talk about this. Mara, if you have a footnote, means bitter. All right, so keep that in mind. So when we answer this question here, we can discuss it. Okay, so here's the question. So the second question here, what's happened to Naomi that she decides to call herself by a new name?
She lost her husband, her sons. She lost it all.
Yeah, first off, there was a famine in her own land, so she went to go live in Moab. Remember, this is a part that was not part of the land of Israel. This is the pagan country around Israel. And so she goes to live there, and then, of course, she has her two sons and her husband, and everything seems to be going all right. And then, well, her husband dies. And why would that have been a big deal? Do you know anything about kind of how the culture worked in the Middle East,
Because women
especially back then?
They don't work. They have no way of earning money. And
Yeah. If you didn't have a husband back in that time, and you weren't independently wealthy or anything because your husband had been wealthy, you hopefully had some sons, because then they would be the ones, "Oh, okay, come on, mama, we'll take care of you." And that's kind of what's happening. And her sons take Moabite wives, but then what happens?
they die.
They die too. So think of this. She's not living in her own land. She's living in this foreign country, now with two daughters-in-law, and understanding what that meant, she literally has basically no way to take care of herself. All of her security is gone, absolutely gone. So it kind of makes sense now when we see that she's going to go back to her land, and she tells her daughter-in-law, no, stay here. Why should they stay here? She says, what could at least be done for you if you stay here?
Get a new husband.
Yeah, you can at least get a new husband, and then you can have a family, and things will be all right with you. Don't worry about me. So she decides because of this, and when Ruth finally says, I'm going with you, she changes her name basically, or says, at least don't call me Ruth, because that meant pleasant or not Ruth, I'm sorry, Naomi, that meant pleasant. She wasn't feeling very pleasant right then. So she says instead, call me Mara, because she's very bitter. Now, who does she blame for her circumstances?
God.
God. She doesn't. She says the Almighty has kind of done that. This is tough stuff. And so let's look at that. Well, and that's, how does this make you feel? I mean, when you read that, and she's kind of just like, man, look at what the Almighty's done to me, and I mean, how does that kind of,
She was human.
yeah.
You know, I think we would all feel that way.
Yeah.
It'd be hard to say, oh, well, God's got a reason for taking my husband and my sons and moving me into a country that I have no business being in, I know nothing about, so it would be easy for us to blame God for that.
Mm-hmm.
That's human instinct.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting that when you read it, we have to understand something about God. I mean, God is absolutely sovereign. He controls everything, the old idea that there are no rogue molecules in the universe, and that's absolutely true. I mean, in a sense, all things that happen to us are either caused by God or allowed. So even when bad things happen to us, he's allowing it for a reason. Like you say, it might be hard to grasp at the time, but if we understand it right, we know that he is in charge of it all. And I'm not saying it makes it easier, but it does help a little bit when you do find yourselves in these circumstances, because God is in control of those circumstances. Even the ones where we wish we weren't anywhere near. He is in absolute, total control. So I think it might kind of shake us, go, wow, she's like kind of, wow, laying it on God. But in a sense, he does control it. And we hope that, we would say, well, I trust you here, Lord. But then, like you say, we are human. And it's hard when we're in those circumstances sometimes to have that level of faith to say, I know you have this. I know there's a reason for this. I'm not seeing it right now, but I know there's one. It's really difficult.
Well, it's kind of like in my situation, in my life,
Mm-hmm.
I was in a 25-year marriage that was horrible. It was like living in hell. It was very abusive. And I kept asking God, why?
Mm-hmm.
And even though I wasn't living for God at that point, I would pray every morning. He drove a truck, and I prayed every morning when he left the house, please don't let him come home.
Mm-hmm.
Let him have a wreck and get killed. And that's terrible to have, to be that desperate to pray that to God. But that's how miserable I was. And I was bound and determined I wasn't going to leave because, my kids, I wasn't going to have them in a split up home. And then I started having grandkids,
Mm-hmm.
But in the meantime, my brother lived in Memphis and I lived in Taylorsville. And he called me one day and asked me if I would like to have a part-time job with the company he worked for. And it was a merchandising company. And I'm like, sure, Of course, at the time, I wasn't seeing the far out picture. I was just seeing at that point it was getting me out of the house and away from everything to where I could, I put 125% into my job, and trying to get my mind off of everything that was going on at home. And, but in the last of April in 2000, it wound up, I met him.
Mm-hmm.
Same kind of work, and my marriage had ended in February of 2000. His had ended after 25 years in March of 2000. God let us meet the end of April in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, now I see, and we both have talked about that so many times of why God would allow us to be in a 25-year marriage, both of us, and it be so miserable, on both sides. But it taught us a lot on how to treat each other and how to love each other and how to depend on God, and it was just, and I see this in us, and
we are put into situations, like as an adult now, I can appreciate the fact, the things that I went through, and I say this now, everybody has their story and have been through different things, and there's things I look back in my past, go,
Mhm.
but I would never change them because I am who I am now, and we
That's
are
exactly
set
right.
on a path, and you try, you still want to go, Lord, I have no idea why I'm going through this, but I'm going to trust you're going to do something great with this, and, many times before I've said, that just looking back, now I'm going, yeah, now I get it, I get it, and I try to use that, when something happens, I'm going, you take a big deep breath, and you're like, okay, here we go, and you hope that.
And I think what you guys have talked about, and even just the story of Ruth in general, when we kind of get here and talk about it here in a second, it really just demonstrates that verse in Romans 8:28. God works all things for good for those who love Him and are called according to His purposes, even the horrible things in our lives. Yeah, I've got a saying that, okay, if I get cancer, He's doing one of two things with giving me cancer. He's either making me more like Jesus, He's going to shape me to be more like Jesus because of it, or He's taking me home. And either way, that's ultimately for my good. And so all of those things. And so with you guys, with your experiences, with those years of just rough times, I mean, He's shaping you
Mhm.
to be more like Him so that you can then be patient and loving and kind and generous, because you had to go through all of that other stuff to kind of shape you to be like that. And it's like when a sculptor's got that piece of marble, it's just a rock, and it takes an awful lot of work to make it into that sculpture.
Mhm.
And what does it take? It takes lots of blows from that chisel. He's got to break the rock. He's got to break us sometimes, so that we can be more like Him. He's that potter in the clay, like in Jeremiah. He's got to make it, and then he's like, no, we're starting over here. I'm just going to mess you all up because you need to be messed up so I can get you here where you need to be.
It's like those trees in Biloxi. That just made me think of that whenever you just said that. Whenever the hurricanes came through, Katrina came through, and there was a bunch of trees uprooted in Biloxi. Well, this guy and his son went through and took these trees and sculptured them in beautiful sculptures, and he's got them all planted now throughout Biloxi, and that just reminded me of that. I mean, something that was pretty, and then it was totally destroyed, and then God was able to, take somebody and make them whole again. And that reminded me of that guy and his son doing those trees down there that way.
I mean, and that's how God does us. He will cut things out of us,
Mhm.
and it's going to hurt. But the only reason He cut something out of us is because it needed to go. So, that's one of the things that helps us get through those times. All right, now it's asked us to skim this piece of Ruth. Now, obviously, we can't just all sit here and skim, but we can just talk a little bit about the story of Ruth. Are we all at least generally familiar with the story of Ruth? Generally, kind of, sort of. All right, so Ruth comes back, and it's the beginning of the barley harvest is where we've left off. And so remember, Naomi and Ruth, they are two single women. Naomi's husband's dead, so's Ruth's. They've got nobody else to count on. And so what does Naomi tell Ruth to go do? She needs to go glean in the fields of somebody. Go find somebody to glean in their fields. Because that was part of the Old Testament law. When people went to I'm blanking out on this word. Harvest their crops. They weren't supposed to go back over them. Like if they go and they're harvesting the crops, they're bringing the sheaves of wheat in, then if they look back and realize, oh, I didn't grab this piece over here, they weren't supposed to stop and go back. They're supposed to leave it. And they're also supposed to leave the edges of their field and not harvest them, because they're supposed to leave that for, they call it the sojourner and the widows. The people that didn't have any way to take care of themselves, the people that were either just traveling or widowed people, so that they could be, and the orphans, and so they could be taken care of. So Naomi tells Ruth, hey, go find somewhere to glean. And where does she find to glean? Do you remember in the story?
And Boaz.
In Boaz's field, right. And it turns out that Boaz is one of their relatives, what they call a kinsman redeemer. And that's going to come up here in just a second. And so Boaz kind of finds favor with her. I mean, she's a beautiful woman, and she, you know, and he kind of looks after her, says, you know, follow after my girls, and if you're ever thirsty, go get a drink from, you know, here. And then he even told his workers, hey, you know, when you're harvesting, if she's harvesting like where she actually shouldn't be, like, don't yell at her, just let her glean wherever. And he said, even, you know, pull some stuff out, some, you know, toss it back. Because he was probably, you know, pretty taken by her, a beautiful woman. Plus, he had already heard about her, kind of her character, what she had done. Because remember, is she a Jewish woman?
No.
No, she's not a Jewish woman. She's from Moab. So she comes from this pagan culture. But when she comes with Naomi, what does she say to her? Your people shall be my people. Your God shall be my God. So she obviously, I mean, of course, we don't get the whole backstory, but she had obviously come to believe in the God of Israel and trust in him. So she's not going to leave Naomi. And so this really gets around, and Boaz had heard about it. Of course, so as she's gleaning, and of course then he's really taken by her, so he'll kind of like say, here, take some extra barley home to Naomi. And Naomi finds out, oh, it's Boaz, he's one of our kinsmen redeemers. We'll go to him at the threshing floor and lay at his feet. And people went, wait, why might she do that? What in the world is that, laying at his feet? What might she be signaling to Boaz if she's going to lay at his feet at the threshing floor?
She's going to serve him?
Yeah, it's kind of saying, it's like, well, I'm available to marry, to this, that, and the other, to be your servant, that sort of thing. So Boaz wakes up and is like, whoa, there's a woman at my feet. What's the deal? And he finds out it's Ruth. And does anybody know, if you've read it, what's Boaz's reaction?
That let's pretend you're not here, or that you came into my feet, and we're gonna go find another. I don't know how he worded it, but something about a better redeemer.
Well, there was a closer person that could have redeemed them, and we'll get to that here in a second. But he was like so excited. He was like, oh, and he even says like, oh, you didn't go after these younger men. You could, you know, man, you're willing to let me be your redeemer? Wow. And so he's obviously very taken with Ruth. So he was like so excited. He's like rushing out. He's going to get this taken care of. And even Naomi says, oh, there's no way he's going to sit on this. He's going to take care of this today. And that's why, you know, and it's kind of in a very humble way. She comes to Boaz, who's a very prosperous man, and just basically says, hey, I'm willing to, you know, you can be my redeemer. I'll marry you, essentially. And, you know, she could have gone and married a much younger man and, you know, started her family that way. But no, she went with Boaz. And that's one of the reasons he's kind of like so jazzed about it. You know, me? Really? You know, like when I first started dating Olivia. Really, me?
Yeah.
Oh, how sweet.
I felt the same way.
Oh my goodness.
That's right. Oh, how sweet. All right. But anyway. All right, so.
We know where our bread's buttered, don't we?
That's right, absolutely. That's right. Luckily, you know, obviously I'm the smarter one in the relationship because she chose me and I chose her. So there we go. Next question.
But you asked, and she said yes.
That's right. All right, so let's read Ruth 4, 1 through 12, and let's see how Boaz approaches this whole deal. Do I have a volunteer that would like to read Ruth 4, 1 through 12?
Hang on, I will. All right. One day, Ruth's mother. Oh, whoops. Switch. Sorry.
It's all right.
Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat down there just as the guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along. Boaz says, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down.
Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here," and they did so. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of these elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I am next in line." "I will redeem it," he said. Then Boaz says, "On the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property." At this, the guardian redeemer said, "Then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it." Now, in the earlier times in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, "Buy it yourself," and he removed his sandal. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, "Today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses." Then the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in that word
Ephrata.
and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." You said through 12, right?
Correct. Oh, okay, all right. So your translation is just a little different there. Okay, that's fine. Cool. All right, so he says, I got to get this matter settled because he's obviously quite taken with Ruth. So he goes and he finds the kinsman redeemer that is actually legally next in line to acquire this property. But then, of course, in acquiring the property, if you know anything about the Old Testament law, if one of your relatives, and of course they say is if your brother has a wife and he dies, what's the brother supposed to do? He's supposed to marry the widow and have children for his brother that now can't, so that nobody of the people of Israel kind of disappears, essentially. And that's kind of the issue here. So how does Boaz dissuade his relative from redeeming the land that he actually could have redeemed? Because he actually wanted to redeem it. So yeah, I'll do that. But then what happens?
He told him, he said, "But if you get the land, you also get Ruth." I mean, not.
Yeah.
You also get Ruth.
Yeah, because that was his wife, and now, well, since he obviously didn't have any brothers, you're the closest relative, that's your job. Why won't he do it?
Because that's at a risk of
Endangering his own estate.
Yeah, his own.
Yeah, and we don't know anything else about the guy. Maybe he already had other kids or something. I don't know. But he was concerned that if he did that, it might get really weird as far as inheritance goes. And then that might make things difficult. So he's like, no, I'm not, okay, I'm all about buying the land, but Ruth comes in the deal, no, I'm not going to do it. You go ahead and do it, Boaz. So that's no problem for Boaz.
Do you think these guys were like cousins of their husbands?
Probably.
Or something, or?
Yeah, cousins or something like that. Probably. I mean, they were relatives of some kind. So.
I think they said something about it was Naomi's husband. It was his brother, wasn't or his uncle.
It might have been. Yeah. It may have been the specific piece in there. All right. So read Ruth 4:13 through 22. How does the Lord provide for Naomi even more than she could have hoped for? So who would like to read 4:13 through 22?
I don't mind.
All right. Thank you.
So Boaz, 13?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
13. Okay. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went in to her, and the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. And then the women said to Naomi, Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, A son has been born to Naomi. And they named him Obed. And he was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Aminadab. Aminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salomon. Salomon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David.
Okay.
Very good.
All right. Yeah, you got most of those names. You nailed most of those names.
That
was great.
I had a whole lot of begats in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, because you got the King James.
Yes.
There's a lot of begatting going on. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we see now at the end of this story? I mean, when I call it a story, I almost feel kind of like sacrilegious. At the end of this, I don't like to call it a story.
Story, though.
It is a story, but
It's a true story.
it's true. So I don't
It's
think
text.
Story. Yeah, there we go. At the end of this text, how has God provided for Naomi even more than she could have hoped for when she was out in the land of Moab?
For Naomi, she's got now a grandson.
Mm-hmm.
She's now got she continues her lineage. Is that what you're talking
Well, that obviously, yeah, her lineage, well, maybe not technically actually hers is
True,
continued,
her
but her family's
family
is
tree, yeah.
continued. But as far as for her, let's remember, what was her situation when she left Moab?
about?
She did nothing.
Right.
She literally had nothing. She had no hope.
Mhm.
She had zero hope. That's why she was telling him, go, leave, good Lord, leave, go back. There's nothing with me here. She not only has now a family, now with Ruth and Boaz, but her entire situation has been completely 180'd.
Mhm.
I mean, she went from having zero to, and I mean, Boaz was already pretty well off, but now she's in with that, because it's not like these days where, we go and we move out of our parents' house and then, yeah, hey, how you doing there, Mom? We'll stick you in the home, when you get, you lived with your family and you stayed with your family. So she went from having zero going, don't call me pleasant, don't call me Naomi, call me bitter, call me Mara, because that's what she felt was her lot. And now it's been completely 180'd. I mean, who could really imagine having that kind of a change? So question 6, Ruth was just an ordinary woman, but through her the Lord provided much more for us than we deserve. So wait a second here. They haven't said anything about us in the book of Ruth, or have they? You look at that last piece that Susan actually very skillfully read for us. What is that? That last piece, all the begats.
Yeah.
What is that?
And Jesse, the father of David.
It's a lineage that gets to King
Jesus
David.
Christ.
She is in the lineage of Jesus Christ.
Mhm.
This Moabite, non-Israeli woman who, for all intents and purposes, just should have left and gone home and gone back to her people and to her gods, said, no, I understand that the God of Israel is God, and so I'm staying with you and going with you. And through her act of love, it's like the same thing we saw with Rahab, in Jericho. I mean, a prostitute, this kind of thing. And she gets to be in the lineage of Jesus too. Why? Because of her faithfulness and her belief in what the Lord has promised. And so Ruth helps us eventually get to Jesus. So what ordinary means does God use to accomplish extraordinary purposes in our lives? How does God take the ordinary and use it?
That's just like what I was saying a while ago. He used my brother to call me, to offer me a job with the company he, was a manager for. And it worked its way around to where he and I met,
Mm-hmm.
in Food Line in Blue Rock.
I feel that way about when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. You know, a lot of people want to say I'm really sorry, but you know, I know that we all die and we all have a way of getting there. And I think I feel very blessed that I had the year and a half that I got to take care of my mom and be with my mom. That it gave me a sense of we're doing this together and it's okay. And she was very lighthearted about it. I mean, she knew, and it was, you know, I think with my mom's illness is what brought me closer to God. Is what made me think, thank you. Because my mom could have just walked out the door and been hit by a car, and I would never been able to have the conversations that I had, or to say I love you, or do the things. You know, and I know that happens to other people, and they have that story. But I'm very thankful that I got a year and a half with my mom. You know,
Good quality time.
And it brought me closer because I said, you know, and it was kind of one of these things that before my mom got sick, we were living in Virginia. We were trying to move down here. Will kept trying to get the job down here, and they kept refusing him. And then boom, my mom got sick, and Will said, "Your mom's moving in with us. We need to take care of her." We moved her. 2 months after my mom passed, there was another job opening, and Will got it. Now I know why. He didn't get the job. We needed to be up there.
Right.
That's why I took care of my mom. So, I mean, something like that, just, you wouldn't think it was, some people want to just be, woe is me and be down, but I am not. I am so thankful for that time.
And think about just the most ordinary means to do something extraordinary. I mean, in the incarnation, when he sends Jesus, he doesn't send him like he deserves to be sent. I mean, if you were going to send the Son of God to earth, I mean, he should be a king and just rule. Where is he? He sends him in a stable, in a backwater of the Roman Empire, to nothing. He was poor. He had nothing, but yet he used putting him in that circumstance to demonstrate important things to us. It's not about us. It's not about what we achieve and what we do. It's about what God has done for us through Jesus. And that's the most important thing. I mean, that is the most extraordinary thing that ever could have been done. I mean, crucifixion, that was just an ordinary way to kill people. But through crucifixion, we have been washed, made clean, and we are brought into the family of God
Amen.
through something awful and terrible and just ordinary and everyday.
Don't we appreciate more when we look at somebody's story and say, man, you know, they were way down here and look how hard they worked. And sometimes we grumble at people who, he was born into money and he had, you know, a silver spoon, and you don't tend to appreciate those people because you don't think they appreciate what they have. You know, we kind of look at those, wow, you know, they paid for their college, they bought their own car, you know, they struggled. And so we appreciate that.
And I've noticed that some folks that maybe have not gone through the struggles, they don't understand. Then, therefore, it explains sometimes their behavior. It explains sometimes their attitudes. You know, and it's not their fault that maybe they haven't gone through certain things, but I need to understand their journey is different than mine, and maybe they haven't gotten there yet. You don't want bad things to happen to people, but it sometimes explains other people's attitudes, maybe selfish comments. Sometimes I hear selfish comments by people, and I'm like, seriously, you don't get that? But maybe in their journey they haven't gotten there yet, and I have to take a step back and go, one day they'll understand, and you know, maybe I can give them a little hindsight, a little forethought, just because their journey hasn't taken them there yet.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not their fault, but I have to step back and go, you know, they just haven't been there yet, and I need to.
And God can use us too, and what we've already
Right.
gone through, to help people and say, hey,
That's right.
you know, let's think of these things. You know, He wants us to help each other in this.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of what we do.
And I think when you were talking a while ago about, you know, Jesus being born in a stable with animals and you know, and then Him being crucified, that He was probably lower than any of us will ever see.
Oh,
know?
absolutely.
Ever.
Beyond a shadow of a doubt.
You know, and I think that God allowed that to show people that you know, here, this is my son, and this is where he was born. This is where he went to, 33 years later, he died on the cross, and suffered all of this. So it doesn't matter what you go through, God is there to help you through it.
And he did all that for us.
But when you're down, exactly, but when you're down, it's hard to see that.
It's hard to see
Mhm.
that.
You know. Because you're like, woe is me, and like we said, well, good, it's human instinct, to feel that, But if we could just think, when stuff like that happens to us, if we could just stop and think about what we just talked about this morning, about how low Jesus started and what he is now, to all of us, and people could make it through life a whole lot better. It's just human instinct.
Would anyone like to close us out in prayer, because we are definitely at our ending time?
Go ahead, hon.
Oh.
You're so good at it.
That's your call.
Uh-huh.
Dear gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for this time together, Lord, and we pray that we are not just learners of your word, but doers of your word. Help your word change us and mold us to be more like you, so that we can help bring others to know who you are and to understand your love for them. All this we ask in Jesus' holy and precious name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, guys.